Our first question for tonight goes like this. Dear Luang Por, the teaching is that dukkha arises out of our attachment to the five aggregates. The candas are the essence of our existence, the mind and the body. Does the suffering arise out of attachment to the five candas rather than the nama rupa per se?
Attachment comes ultimately from ignorance, not knowing, not understanding. With ignorance, this sense of self arises, you make karma, you do things, and this stimulates craving, attachment, becoming, birth, old age, sickness, death, more suffering. So ignorance is the real source of our suffering. So they say the Arahant, the one who's practiced and completed this Noble Eightfold Path, perfected it, they have no more suffering because ignorance has been removed from their mind. But they still have five candas going on. You still have a body as long as they're alive. They have thoughts and feelings. But there's no ignorance conditioning the clinging, the attachment to them. And they may still have pain, but they don't suffer with that pain. So when they get injured or when they are ill or tired, whatever, they don't suffer with that, they just know it. They know, oh yeah, candas are ill, the candas are in pain, there's this injury or feel tired because I've been up all day or up all night or whatever. They know that, but they don't mentally suffer with it. There's no attachment to views and conceit and no reaction with aversion or resistance to pain, say. And then there's no seeking of pleasure. There's no seeking to use the candas for pleasure because they know the candas are just that much. They're impermanent, they're not self, they're suffering. If you cling to them, you'll suffer. So they still have candas, but they're no longer clinging or identifying with them as self. So ultimately it's mindfulness and insight that brings you to that point. And at first you may have glimpses of the candas as not self. But for the Arahant, it's permanent. And they've permanently eradicated the ignorance, permanently eradicated wrong view. So they're living with the candas, but not attaching to them. So Ajahn gave the image of oil and water in a bottle. You have a bottle, which is like the world, and then there's water in it, there's oil in it, but they don't mix. So they're together. So it's like the mind of the Arahant. The mind of the Arahant is there, but it's not attached to the world. The oil and the water don't mix. So it's still experiencing the world, still experiencing sense objects, feelings, the body, but not attaching. Completely free, completely separate. That's because of the lack of ignorance. The Four Noble Truths have been realized, understood. The Noble Eightfold Path has been perfected. So if you want to eradicate ignorance, cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path in its entirety, not just one bit of it, the whole lot.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Ajahn Kalyano, could you please share some good books to read for beginners? Sadhu.
Kind of depends what your character is. I would say everything written, or Ajahn Chah didn't write books, but his talks were written down. So everything written down, Ajahn Chah's talks. They're all good, and they're quite good for beginners because he had a gift of explaining Dhamma in a very direct, simple, straightforward way. And particularly if you practice any kind of meditation, you'll quickly understand where he's coming from. Or if you live in a monastery, you'll understand why he describes the Dhamma in the way he does. But I wouldn't just read Ajahn Chah alone. I would read Ajahn Chah in conjunction with the suttas. Pick a sutta and just read it. Try and read it from start to finish. So it could be something from the Majjhima Nikaya. There's the famous suttas like the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta or the Anapanasati Sutta, Samadhiti Sutta. Yeah, there's a lot of suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length sayings, which are quite good. But just pick one and read it. Or maybe something even simpler, the Dhammapada is quite good. A verse of the Dhammapada, just read it, maybe read the story behind it. And just gently ease into it. But I would take up both suttas or the Tripitaka, the Buddhist teachings, and read some of Ajahn Chah as well. Ajahn Chah's biography is also very interesting and informative. But you get these two things working together. One is based more directly on the practice and perhaps a little bit more modern. And then one is the words of the Buddha. But together you'll probably find you get a good starting point for the practice. But any reading you do, I would have that in mind. You're reading to practice. It's not an end in itself. Buddhism isn't just a philosophy or something to read to intellectually satisfy you, an explanation of the world or life or something. It's giving you things to investigate, explanations, statements that then you investigate to see whether it's true or not through your own practice. So everything you read is for the practice. That would be the attitude I'd encourage, to get the most out of what you read.
Sadhu. Another question. Dear Ajahn, thank you very much for the Dhamma today. How do we let go of our attachment to the experience of pain and sickness? How do we let go of all resistance, have more acceptance, and a mind wide enough to bear strong and chronic pain? Thank you.
Practice. Just practice meditation, mindfulness, and reflect on the Dhamma regularly. And one thing the Buddha encouraged us to do is reflect every day. I am of the nature to sicken, I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. That's a recommendation of the Buddha. And if you have faith in the Buddha as a wise teacher, well, why not practice what he taught? Every day, bring yourself to reflect on those things, either by reciting in a chant or reading it, or if you can trust yourself, think it. But trouble is, we can't always trust ourselves. We end up not thinking about aging, sickness and death, and thinking about all kinds of worldly things. And so when aging, sickness and death hits us, it's a shock. We're not ready for it because we couldn't trust ourselves and we didn't think about it. That's why Buddhists do things like read suttas or read talks or listen to talks. That's why Buddhists do chanting. It's because it's really making you reflect on these teachings in a very clear, direct way. Otherwise, we tend to fill our mind full of everything else, which is not Dhamma, and we get confused and forget the Dhamma, forget the truth, and then find that we're suffering. So regularly remind yourself, you're going to get old. You are getting older. You will get old. You will get sick. It happens. We don't want it to happen, but it will happen. So you're preparing yourself for these truths. And really it's happening all the time. I mean, sickness, there's different degrees, aren't there? It's not all chronic pain and serious illness. Just feeling hungry is a kind of sickness. Feeling too hot, feeling too cold is sickness. Sitting and having an achy leg is sickness. In the sense, your body is constantly bringing you pain, discomfort, things are going wrong with it. Most of them minor, but that's constantly happening because your body is changing all the time. If you're mindful, you'll pay attention to it, you can learn from it. And so the idea is to get to the point where you see it's just normal for the body to bring you pain sometimes, to fall ill or get injured sometimes. It's just normal. Then you don't suffer with it. You just know it or understand it the way it is. And then you start with small things, and one day maybe you get really sick, really ill. Okay, you're ready for it. Oh, this is just normal. Everyone gets old, everyone gets sick, everyone must die. If you really bring your mind to contemplate it, reflect on it regularly, it won't be a shock, it won't be a surprise. It'll just be the way things are. Oh, that's just the way things are. Yeah, we get sick. Sometimes things go wrong with the body. Getting old. Yeah, that's just the way things are. Your mind doesn't create a lot of suffering out of it. It's not attaching to the pain as self. It's just that's the way a human body goes. It's normal. That's its nature.
Sarulumpu. Next question. Thank you, Ajahn, for the guidance. What would be an effective way, in a practical sense, to practice sense restraint? Thank you.
Well, one is listen to the Dhamma regularly because it will remind you why sense restraint is important. You're getting explanations of the role of sense restraint because out in society there's not much restraint and nobody holds it up as a virtue or something good for you. Quite often it's looked down on, sense restraint. It's been old-fashioned or no fun. So listen to the Dhamma regularly and then practice mindfulness and meditation regularly because then you'll see the value of sense restraint. Because if you're unrestrained in your senses, you're constantly looking at things that stimulate greed, anger and delusion, listening, tasting, touching in an unrestrained way, getting attached to endless pleasure seeking maybe. When you meditate, you'll see the results of it very quickly. Your mind is not peaceful. Your mind cannot settle down because of the lack of sense restraint in your daily life. And you'll start to understand cause and effect, how one thing leads to another. And similarly, if you practice sense restraint, you'll start seeing the good results of that. Your mind will settle down more easily. You'll be able to achieve deeper states of samadhi when you practice sense restraint. You'll understand the Dhamma, say the Dhamma of impermanence or not self, more easily when you practice sense restraint. So it supports your meditation, and lack of sense restraint hinders your meditation. So you'll see that relationship, hopefully, the more you practice.
Sarulumpu. Another question. Dear Ajahn, if I'm correct, a stream winner sees this body and mind are two different things. When practicing for stream entry, do we need to see the Rupa Kanda as not self, and one Nama Kanda is not self in meditation?
Well, it's one part of our investigation, isn't it? You're questioning, is this body a self? If it's a self, what does that mean? It means that I own it. If you own something, you should be able to control it and order it about and make it how you like. And we spend a lot of time trying to make this body how we like, make it look how we like, feel how we like, make it healthy like we like, strong. But in the end, we can't do it, can we? We can't stop it getting old, weaker, sicker, and we can't stop it dying. So that's a question, isn't it? Something to investigate over and over again, not just once. Also investigate, is this body really that desirable as a thing? Is it beautiful? Not really. There's a lot of unpleasant, unattractive parts to it. Is it that desirable? Well, when it just gets old and sick and dies, well, that doesn't sound very good. So keep that in mind. The Sotapanna basically is seeing their own body as a corpse all the time. They know this body is going to die. They're not surprised by that. They're not denying it, hiding from it. They just know this body is impermanent. It's not self. All the time. So keep investigating. Ask the question, and of course, investigate the mind. How do you investigate the mind? Well, it's through the contents, the activities of the mind, isn't it? The thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, the memories and perceptions, the sense consciousness. But because mind is invisible, it's fast, it's constantly moving and changing, it's perhaps a little harder to see, but still, it's doable. You just have to practice a lot, develop a lot of mindfulness. That's why I was saying earlier, is contemplate, it's not certain. How many thoughts have you had today go through your mind? How many of those thoughts did you like? How many did you not? How many you thought were good thoughts? How many were foolish thoughts or just random thoughts? If your mind and your thoughts are really self, then you should be able to command the mind just to think exactly what you want, remember what you want, how you want, do everything you want, if it's self. Because you should be able to be in control if you really own it. But what's going on? It's a conditioned thing. Constantly experiencing different moods, emotions, reactions, depending on causes and conditions. As you start observing that with mindfulness, then you're revealing the truth to yourself. You can ask these questions. So little by little, you gain more detached awareness. So you're still aware, you still have a mind, and you still think, but you're not attaching so much to those thoughts as a self, or taking ownership of them. So you may even have some unpleasant thoughts arise, but you say, oh, unpleasant thought, I know that. Rather than letting it take over your mind and you spend the next half an hour feeling miserable and depressed, which is what's going on a lot of the time, isn't it? We're getting caught into our moods. If you can establish mindfulness, then a thought is just a thought, a feeling is just a feeling, memory is just memory. Perception is the same, isn't it? Ajahn Chah always used to say you have a piece of wood. I don't have a piece of wood here, but say you had a piece of wood the size of a ruler, so 1 foot long or 30 centimeters long. For someone who wants a toothpick, that piece of wood is now too big. That's the perception you would have if you wanted a toothpick. But if you wanted a log, then a ruler is too small. The ruler is just a ruler, it's just a piece of wood that size. But the perception you put onto it depends on your craving and attachment. I want a toothpick, I want a log. I guess someone who wants a ruler wins. I'm happy I've got a ruler in my hand and that's what I want. But the perception we put onto things is where the suffering comes, by attaching to that perception. So the mind is a subtle thing, it's fast, so we need to develop a lot of mindfulness and a lot of wisdom. But you investigate it the same as the body. It's impermanent, suffering, it's not self. Keep investigating. It's not sure, it's not certain. Don't believe every thought, every opinion, every perception. Some of them are just tricking us and causing us suffering. That's what you have to investigate.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next, we have a raised hand.
Good evening.
Good evening, Luang Por. Can you hear me?
Sorry, we will just... Okay, you may ask your question again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My question, Luang Por, is around the skillful way to help your pets pass. So our pets, like animals. Yes, so our pet has been quite sick, and from what I understood, it was the skillful way was to keep them comfortable. I let her listen to a lot of Dhamma and do a lot of chanting. So every day I was chanting, and she calms down. The pain subsides with the chanting significantly. So she was having waves of pain, then calm. So, but if the vet and other people around me was saying, oh, why she's suffering, why don't you like kind of put her down type thing. And I was like, well, my understanding is this, and I want to help her have the best possible chance for a better rebirth, following on. So actually today, at like 12:45, she passed, but it was like what you just explained before. It was like she was shedding. She shed, the body was like shed. So I was able to let her pass peacefully, listening to chanting while we chanted. But is there like a time when people would put the animals down, or is what I was doing? I felt what I was trying to achieve was the correct way in this situation, but
Yeah,
I
well,
wanted to.
I personally would do something similar to you. I wouldn't put an animal down.
Yes,
We practice panatipata if you're really following the Buddhist path, so you wouldn't
yes,
kill even what we'd call mercy killing or compassionate killing.
yes,
I'd say the more compassionate thing is doing what you do. Just give the animal a lot of love, care, attention, good
yes,
energy from your meditation, from the chanting, from the Dhamma. Animals are very sensitive. They may not understand the words, but they understand the emotion very quickly. So if your mind is peaceful, they'll get that peace very quickly. And that peace is
yes,
probably the most useful thing for them. Obviously,
yes,
they're in pain, but putting them down in pain, probably you're going to be in a more negative state of mind when you do that. You're not chanting and meditating, you're just going to the vet and putting them down. So
yes,
if you are at home chanting, meditating, developing this peaceful energy and directing it to the animal, I would say that's the best thing for the animal. And you've proven it because you said you could tell your animal was becoming more calm when you were doing
yes,
that. So that
yes,
seems the correct thing to do for me. If you could talk to your animal, the animal would probably say, don't kill me, don't put me down, don't take me to the vet.
yes,
Only because they can't speak, that they have no choice in the matter. You become like God, sort of deciding for them. But if they
yes,
could speak, I don't think they'd want to die. I think they'd say, "Yeah, do more meditation for me."
yes. Luckily, because of me listening and understanding the bit I understood, I was able to explain to the vet, and she was also understanding of that and supportive. But so I was glad that she was able to pass peacefully. With, you could see that the water would come, like she would, like the breaking down of the body. It was like she was giving us a last teaching. So I've got her behind you, but so tomorrow we are going to cremate her. So, but
Okay,
thank
well,
you, Lumpur.
just do some chanting like the Metta Sutta, Karanya Metta Sutta, and share
Yes.
merit with your animal that's passed. Wish them to be reborn in a good place.
Thank you, Lumpur. Thank you very much.
Sadhu. We have another question. Dear Ajahn, can you explain again how do we investigate no self of the mind? Thank you.
Well, often the way into seeing no self, first of all, is seeing impermanence. It's not the only way, but I think it's probably the most common way, which is why Say, for example, Ajahn Chah uses this, it's not sure, not certain. Every thought you have, it arises and passes away, doesn't it? That's what thoughts do. Every feeling, every emotion, good or bad, pleasant, unpleasant, they arise, they pass away. So, it's kind of obvious, so obvious we miss it. If you say, this thought is me, oh, well, it's gone. If it was me, it should just stay there in a fixed status of just this one thought all the time. Or one emotion. You're angry, you're happy, you're depressed, you're sad, you're excited, you're bored. It's not that there's nothing there, it's just what can you say is a permanent, lasting self in any of that? Nothing, because it's all impermanent, it's changing, it's transient. So, this is something you have to just keep investigating, and then maybe you sort of take a step back and develop more detached awareness, and you may take this detached awareness as self. So you may progressively kind of uncover layers of self, feelings of peace or insight may be taken as self again, until one day you can see every last thing is not self. Every phenomena, physical and mental, is not self. But it's going to be a progressive thing, I think, for most people. You just start where you're at in your life, in your practice. But I think everyone can appreciate, since this morning you've had many emotions and memories and thoughts go through your mind. Where are they now? If they're a self, why aren't they here now? You just keep prodding and poking and questioning and looking, and it starts to become more obvious.
Sadhu Luang Por. Are there any more questions from anyone? That's all the questions, Luang Por.
Okay, well, nice talking to you tonight, and we wish you well with your Dhamma practice. Tonight is a full moon night, so I encourage you all to do a bit more meditation. If you're tired, do some walking meditation. Make use of the moonlight, and may you all progress in the Dhamma.